it really depends wildly because I've got to think of what characters, if I can, am I playing, what kind of layout, the poster design, the banner design, if need be. Then I've got to be like, what are my players? And again, if you know, with anything which requires a level of input from your players, people are notoriously pulling out. And so I can start with a script list of 16.
Welcome to Metaverse Degen. I'm Lion.
I'm back, and I'm old man Lion. Lion. Yeah, Lion.
I'm Lion.
See, fucked
I'm
already.
Lion.
See, fucked. I know who you are. I'm old man Raptor. I've been gone for so long, I don't even know who I am. And our guest is, I better get there before I fuck up, is...
Hi, I'm Lion as well.
Oh, hi,
no,
Lion.
I'm
I'm
Nebula.
Lion. Nice to
Lions.
meet you, Lion.
Fucking A. Wow.
Nice to meet you too,
Goddamn, we're
Lion.
doing great. We're doing great. We got 3 lions in here. Nobody's lying about nothing, are we? Yeah, there goes the punts. Right
Well, I
out the
could be
window.
Lion.
You could be lying, yeah. I could be lying too. A little bit on the shorter part. Problem, yeah. We better get going, folks. Sorry not to hold that up. Yeah.
Oh.
Da, 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 da.
Who are you and what are you known for? And how'd you even get into this platform?
So hi all, I'm Nebula. Some of you may know me. I do a mixture of things. So I'm a Vrchat host. I do my own podcast called Behind the Lens, taking people to behind the lens, if you will, of creators of Vrchat. And technically I stream, a little inconsistent, but let's not worry about that one. And I do everything Vrchat wise. Yeah.
Oh,
Thank you for having me on.
No problem. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on.
Mm-hmm.
A friend of mine, Code Advanced, was at one of the community meetups, and that's how we heard about you. And I thought, I want to talk to this guy. This guy seems interesting, and so it's very much a pleasure. I'm honored.
I'm honored myself. Thank you for coming. It was quite a
I'll do what he's saying. I'll do what he's saying because I have no fucking clue.
I mean, sounds about right from what I've been hearing. But no, I'm more than happy to be on. It's quite the surprise
Oh, wow.
when suddenly it's like, oh, that's Lion. I know that guy.
So how did you get into VR, and what were some of your first steps that led you to where you are now?
So I initially got into VR first back in 2018, where it was kind of on my laptop, which for anyone who knows PC specs was an i5 laptop, which basically couldn't run things for the life of it. I don't know how I didn't cook it, but I was on that for about a month or two when the original Uganda Knuckles was around. I was a youngin at that time, as young as you can get for VR chat, but then I took a break from it, and then I came back in early 2022 because I had a bit more powerful laptop. It was a Ryzen 9, so it could, hold its weight. And so I came back, I found a Vrchat group, and I was like, cool, I want to go meet more people. And so I did. And everything came from there.
Oh, wow. So of the long list of things you're up to and you're doing, what were some of your first tasks you started learning within the platform, and what led you to it?
So I initially, I guess, of the list per se, I initially started with hosting. So I've been hosting since the back end of 2022 when I was 17 at the time. So I started hosting Vrchat events. It was mainly game nights for a small little community, which is now called Converse. It's an American-based gaming community. They do everything from murder mysteries, game nights, any special events. And so there's a bunch of hosts which we still host to this day. I've started switching to European events because we have an 11 p.m. start time. If I don't, I want my sleep schedule.
I don't blame you.
But I mean, I've got work. I work as a design engineer, so I've got to balance all of this all at once. So I have a plethora of things going on. It's just finding out the way to best balance things for me.
Okay. So of your day job as a design engineer, how much of that do you pull into VR, and how do you schedule and time manage all the stuff you do?
So my day job is as a design engineer. I do a lot of CAD work. I won't speak too much on it because privacy reasons, I will immediately dox myself. Though what I do say to people is I'm a classified radiation worker and work for the government. Take from that what you will.
Okay.
Well,
It's
time
not
for
under
me to
NDA.
leave. I owe the government money. Bye. I'll talk to you later. I gotta go.
It's a different government. You're fine.
Oh, okay.
Well,
Okay.
We're not.
as you work for the government, I won't do anything more. I misunderstood what you said, but as a design engineer.
No, I'm okay talking about it within reason. I will intentionally leave out parts just because I work in a facility which if I say too much, I immediately dox myself. So that's the fun of working in a very specific facility. But yeah, it's very cool. I've met a lot of very interesting people over my about almost a year now working there, and so on the whole, a wealth of experience.
Okay. So, with that said, what kept you going from when you started hosting in the very beginning of VRChat events? When you came back the second time and started hosting events and getting into things, what kept you here?
So I think what mainly kept me back here was the people. I'm a very shy person in real life. You wouldn't be none the wiser just by how kind of expressive I can get. But in VR or outside of VR, I'm quite shy. I'm quite to myself, which is fine. I'm more than happy with that. I like doing my things, talking to people when I can. But in VR, game's on. You can go nuts. And so I like to if I'm doing events, especially murder mysteries, that's kind of what I've fallen into a speciality of for the different communities I host for. So with that, I like to put on a show. I essentially, to quote someone who helped me develop work in kind of presenting, you always become a showman. And so it's not always the easiest with murder mysteries because it's notoriously extremely busy. You've got 16 players roaming a map all at once, and you've got to moderate everything at once. It's organized chaos is the best way I can put it. I love it to pieces, but it's organized chaos. And so there's only so many times when you can kind of put on the show, but it is helpful when you have co-hosts working with you. And so when I can put on a show, I can put on a character, and then you can either become a professor or you can become a rich businessman. And then you just bring an atmosphere and you bring attention. And I find if you can nail it, you can just immerse people in this world temporarily, but it brings a positive feedback on the whole. And that's kind of why I bring to love hosting as a whole, is I get to give people an experience. It's probably the best I can describe it.
No, I can very much understand that sentimentality. You mentioned it can be that you do murder mysteries. Mask, would you mind specifying, clarifying what do you mean by that, and what happens in the murder mysteries? Is it like RP or is it like games?
So murder mystery isn't one defined form. There's different. If you ever get into the murder mystery community, which has probably got 1,000 people stretched across 5, 6, 7 different communities and servers, you have different hosting styles, different rule sets, different everything. There is no one definitive murder mystery style. The way it's based on is an old series called Danganronpa, which, if you know anything about it, it's kind of, you got people out to kill each other, and then you got a mastermind. So you got someone who's controlling the game. The way I do it is different to how other communities do it. I prefer my style, but that's just me. I do games which are normally not so RP intensive, though I do also plan to bring RP intensive ones, just because I have had requests from different members and participants saying, and there goes my headset. My headset is voice activated for concern, so if I say anything, it might trigger it. So it's fun and games. But back to on topic. So I have had some ones which are more RP based, which will be longer. So for anyone who doesn't know, murder mystery can at least be 4 hours, stretching to 7 hours just in event length. And it's basically one long event of, if you die, you die. There ain't no coming back unless someone's reviving you. And even then, only certain roles can do it.
Okay.
And so from there, you kind of build out a narrative. Anyone can go kill each other. You've got a mastermind. Everyone's got to solve each trial. And it's built... How I best describe it is you kind of lay out the narrative and your players will carve it. you can trial out a path for which people will follow. So you have certain roles. Maybe you have something like the recruiter, which can recruit different members to the quote-unquote despair team, which help the mastermind. And then maybe you have a certain type of mastermind, which, oh no, they've hacked a role which disables it, so someone can't use their detective role. And it requires a lot of just strategy and thought process through it. And so from there, I've always loved playing it because you can go so deep into the levels of confusion and just intensity on it that the logic just starts breaking if you think too hard on it, and depending on how deep you go into it.
Okay. So you've alluded to you like your specific hosting style. May I ask, would you mind telling us what that is and how do you do it differently from the other traditional hosts?
So when I say my hosting style, it's based on an overarching hosting style which Converse uses, which is one of the groups I'm part of. It's one of the hosts. It was one of the groups I host for. And so their rule set differs from groups like Elizabeth's Game. I'm good friends with the host at Elizabeth's Game. I love them to pieces. The Jedi, small shout out to you, absolute sweetheart, and all the rest of the hosts over there. I love talking to you when I get time to. But their style, the main difference which separates ours to EG's or Elizabeth's Games is in theirs, the mastermind cannot die. Even if someone tries to kill the mastermind, the person who went to go kill them will die. And so because of that, if you figure out the mastermind before the mastermind trial, you can be like, and I quote, for Nuance, who is the person who brought me into Murder Mystery and taught me how to host, you can quite literally go take the mastermind, say, hey, I'm going to go kill this person, tie them up, drag them to an isolated person location, and kill them. And, well, because the mastermind can't die, you die. Where everyone, by inadvertently, knows who the mastermind is. So that's why we don't like to run it, because as long as the mastermind can make the full game, it's fine, it's not a problem. But that's the main difference. There's small differences in like trials and things like Monokuma Rage we don't run because personally I find it a bit cheap if I can go kill someone. I mean, I have in the past canonically killed players, but it's very, very limited in between. It's more, I see a perfect opportunity, I'm going to confuse the fuck out of my players. But I avoid it because I feel really shitty taking someone out of the game unless I know them well enough. And I can trust that they're not going to, they won't take it to heart. Because Murder Mystery is the kind of game which you can take it personally if things aren't in a good mood for you.
Okay. So, with that said, you did also mention you do things like streaming and podcasting. From there, how did you get into that side of VRChat? So, streaming, I do more general gaming streaming. So I stream with a couple of friends. I've networked across. And I've met a bunch of people in that time. It's not so much VRChat based. It's more just the streaming community in general. But I have done the odd one or two VRChat stream, kind of exploring worlds, taking a different glance on things. Whereas podcast side with Behind the Lens, I find it came about from a walk. And I was thinking, it was Christmas time, last year? And I went for a walk, and I was like, I'm going to go for a walk, and I'm going to think about what I want to do for my YouTube. And on that walk, it's an old walk I like to go through. It basically takes around the stable areas and where I live, because I live in the middle of nowhere. And so I was on this walk for about an hour, and I was thinking to myself, I listened to music, and I was like, well, what do I want to do? I want to do something for VRChat, because that's where I specialize. I'd already, established the hosting base, and there goes my thing. I did not say good to start. But I'd established like a little hosting base. At least people in my community knew me, and I wanted to, with it, I wanted to break down the kind of psychological barriers which people have when people see figures in VRChat. No matter how big or small, everyone's human at the end of the day. And you find if you can have those personal conversations with people, you can humanize people and show, hey, they may be this big and scary person which your brain is pulling up, but maybe if you go have a chat with them, just talk to them,
be chill, just be yourself, and be, kind, nice, respectful, you kind of start to realize there's a bunch of people, they're like you and I. The only difference is they want to express themselves in their own different ways, like with yourself with Metaverse Degen, like with others who build worlds, build avatars. They're all people. We're all people. VRChat is built and handcrafted by the people, which truly make the experiences. And so I find breaking down those mental barriers for people shows that one, we're all human. Everyone can be quite happily talked to. And two, there are some really interesting people in VRChat. You go anywhere and you can find some astounding people.
Oh,
you just have to look for it. I mean, you yourself know, but having done it a bit so myself, you find different worlds, you find different little pocket universes, and then you can just express it and show it to people and like, hey, this exists. This is what people are doing. Come have a look. And the more you look out, the more there is. And I've barely scratched the surface of things. I'm very new as far as networking basis, VRChat-wise, and finding different communities, which is also why I go to community events, which is why you said Coded found me. And so building upon there, you can just... It's a world which can never truly fully be explored. Yeah, I'm going to try my damnedest to try and do it.
I very much agree with you. Fair warning, we've found no matter how much we try and dig up the hidden communities there are here, there's still more. Like every year, someone's inspired to do more. Like I'll use the VRChat rave scene to express this. DJs and club owners or people that in that kind of scene, the musical scene, that want people to have fun and want to host or give an experience for someone, they will very regularly try and pull people in. So with them pull people in to teach them how to do the things, it will inspire others to do more, which is happens all over VRChat with like world builders and avatar builders. So people are inspired to create new communities and do new things. So you may think you found them all this year, but next year you'll find, there's another 100 to 1,000 more communities sprung up in this last year.
I got a
certainly.
question for Lauren.
Go ahead.
Okay. Between the two, behind the lens and the gaming setup, which one are the ones that's more difficult for you?
Well, they're both difficult in their own sense. I would find behind the lens and podcasting is a lot more difficult because you have to work with people. People are notoriously difficult to work with. And so because of that, it's finding the right time, especially being a European. Sure, I can mess up my sleep schedule. As you would say, I can fuck up my sleep schedule, but there's only so much I can mess it up by without interfering with my general life, because I've also got my studies upon my own work as well. And so you find I have to try and find a balance. So Fridays is usually the best time for me. Saturdays are usually a good time, unless I can get a European time. Then I'm a bit more flexible. So I would say trying to find new people, work with people, and people who will be interested and show off what they can do. Hosting side, that's a different kettle of fish. As I might have already mentioned, I work for 3 communities. I work for Converse as my home of origin. It's what's kind of where I'm born and raised, brought up, and it's what's got me to where I have been. It's why I'm able to host anything from culture crashes to science shows to murder mysteries, gaming, and so much more. I don't find myself limited in what I can host. I try to find new things. It's a lot less limited now because I'm trying to recover sleep, but Lord knows I want to go express more. I want to go find more. I want to show people the world. I want to show people themselves, each other, and so much more. And so because of that, I also work in 2 other communities, which I started hosting for. I work for the Synapse, and I work for Virtual Relics. Virtual Relics, I'm not a part of any of the staff team. Virtual Relics operates differently to most communities, so technically anyone can host. But I'm happy to say my murder mysteries go very well. They're very popular, which is a good and a bad thing, because I can only do about once a month. And then signups, I was initially started with gaming just because I wanted to get into the community as well. But I'm now switching over to murder mysteries, and hopefully that turns out as well. But we will just have to see. It is very much a learn as you go. And so from that, my schedules can be all over the place because I'm doing from a mixture of helping out at events, hosting events, just showing up to events generally. And so I would say on average right now, I'm hosting about 3 events a month. I've peaked at about 5, and I regret that because if you're hosting 3 murder mysteries and 2 general events, the descent into insanity is hitting further and further. Having said that, some of those days I went to sleep at 5 in the morning. Please send help. This is a cry for help. Anyone who's hosted murder mysteries, you will understand. It's very taxing emotionally, mentally, and even physically with the lack of sleep. But I'm just addicted to it. I love hosting. I love giving back to people. And that's what I love. I create my own posters for things. I do my own branding. I put out stuff saying, hey, I have my own group for what I do. And that I've now used it because I define myself as a host rather than bound to a community per se. I love my communities I work for to pieces. But I'm not defined as, oh, I'm the Converse host, or I'm the Signups host, or I'm the Virtual Relics host. I'm a murder mystery host. I'm a VRChat event host. And so because of that, I've centralized all my things where I can say, hey, I'm hosting this time, this time, this time, in this group. And so it allows people to be like, oh, I went interested in murder mystery. Oh, I'm in the European time zone. Hey, I'll come to this, assuming, you're over 18. But because of that, I get to centralize what I do and show people, hey, there's more communities, go explore. Go nuts. And again, as I've said...
No, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just a simple way of saying his brains are fried like ours. It's just scrambled. It just amounts on how much you can put back into space, right?
I don't think he sounds scrambled.
Oh,
No,
I mean,
busy
it depends
scrambled. If you got what he's saying, he's busy scrambled and everything else, and he's got so much on his plate. After a while, you look at your plate going, God damn, it ain't a solid boiled egg no more. It's just fucking scrambled.
Okay.
He's busy. He's just downright fucking busy. Constantly on the move, folks. That's what he's trying to say. This man is off the charts. Straight up. And that's what I notice now. So that's cool. And my dog's barking in the background.
No worries. I'd say the egg isn't very much hardboiled. It's very much overdone down to a crisp, but I'm addicted to it. What can I say? I wouldn't say I'm addicted to VRChat. I'm very able to control myself. I do what I do. I spend time with friends. I try to detox when I can. But bloody hell, I love giving back to people. I love hosting. It is just my drug. The joy I feel after events, I can spend 5 hours draining myself to pieces in a murder mystery, and I just hear people say, oh my god, I love that event, and even just the small criticisms like, oh, could you do this, or could you increase the roleplay side, and I'm like, I just take notes of it. I think, how can I do this differently? How can I improve this? How can I work to better myself and to improve the show, improve the experience, and just improve people's fun? And to be able to do that to people is really special. And that's kind of why, as much as it's hard, as much as it's taxing, as much as you're going to get the shit, like, there will always be a terrible event at some point. I've had countless terrible events for things without my control or things which was 100% my fault. And that's natural, but that's the part of improvement. That's the part of finding yourself. And it's learning from your mistakes, which everyone says under the sun, but it's true. It is just true. It's scary. It's scary to make mistakes. It's terrifying when you have 16 eyes bearing down on you, and one small mistake and someone could be like, actually, and then you will get corrected on the things. When you're trying to process things so much at once, I scare some of the Elizabeth games hosts. I wouldn't say scare, but they are concerned for me because most of them write their stuff down in an Excel sheet. All the information, what people's roles are. If they've used it, I do it mentally. I remember the entire game state at once. And is it healthy? No. All I have to work with is the names, their ID, and what role they have. Everything else I have to remember, which sure isn't perfect. I am far from it. But I do a blimmin' well good job with it, I could say, at least for a personal credit.
Well, I could tell you trying to remember a lot of things off the top of your head can be quite a difficult task. So kudos to you for even attempting it, especially in a VR hosting event. I do have a question for you, though. From the sounds of it, it sounds like when you've gained into or went into the hosting side of VRChat, it sounded like you're getting just as much out of it as you are giving to the community as well. What has doing this kind of thing in VR, what does it mean to you as a person?
On the whole, it means a lot to me, for various different reasons. I don't sound it. I'm notoriously I'd say a quite shy person. I very avoid conversations. I wouldn't say avoid per se, but more, I'm not the type to initiate. However, I found in VR chat, you've got to be the person to initiate, because you don't know if you don't make that connection. And that's why, even in my early days, I spent a lot of time in No Time to Talk. Even though I was a part of a group, I spent a lot of time in No Time to Talk, and just talk to people. As I've described to people in that place, if some people remember me there, it is effectively social gambling, and I'm addicted to it. Sure, you'll get people, you'll get all sorts. It's VR chat. That's just life. But you get the chance to meet the interesting people, to meet the special people, to meet the passionate people. And when you find those people, my word, especially when you click, and when you get that moment, and you just bounce off each other. You get to go fully expressive. It's special, and it's not something you can get. As kind of alluded to, live in a very small area. I live in a very quiet area. It's live in the middle of nowhere, so that's fun. But at the same time, I don't meet a lot of people. There's only so many people my age, to be quite frank. But it's difficult to get around, not mobility-wise, but because I'm going to have to drive everywhere, and then I've got to park, and then X, Y, Z. But then to go into VRChat, I find it just doesn't also bring you the interesting people, but it brings you different experiences and different cultures. And it is a hot melting pot. My word, it's a hot melting pot. At the same time, I've met people from Cyprus, I've met people from America, I've met people from Japan and Korea, I've met people from all the Nordic countries. I've met people all over the place. And that's the best part about it. It breaks down your previous connotations on people. And it shows people for who they are. Again, people. And everyone has their emotions, everyone has their feelings, wants, needs, and desires. And on the whole, it just brings people together in a weird sense. And honestly, in this day and age, with everything going on in the world, it can almost feel depressing. And that's sad. It's really sad. Everyone's been through hard times, myself very much included. But to be able to, again, bring the joy in events, bring the joy to people, bring the joy of people around me, it honestly means the world, because I get to give back. I get to show people what I can do. I get to prove people wrong. I get to prove myself and show what I can really do. Because at the end of the day, I don't know my limits. Or I mean, physical limits, yeah, there's only so much I can do. But I don't know what my end cap is. But I'm going to try my darndest to find it. And so that's why it's helped me put myself out there, saying, I'm going to talk to this person. I'm going to try this. I'm going to have a go. And with that all, you find yourself just naturally improving. My speaking abilities, although I'm still perfect, I will slip up a little bit, but it's improved dramatically. I can emphasize myself, show what I can, how I'm trying to narrate a story And I know I'm bouncing all over the place, but in its own hot mess, I just want to show people that there's hope. Things may look bad at points, but if I can be a bringer of hope to people, if that's the thing on this world, I'd be more than happy.
Well, I think that's a very honorable thing for you to do. Not a lot of people will be willing to take that kind of mantle, so I wish you the absolute best in your journeys. Now I want to touch back into podcasting a bit. From that walk you mentioned, what made you want to bring the podcast about? What made you decide that this is the thing, and what was the first episode like and leading up to it?
So the first episode was wasn't too bad because Nuance, who was the first person I interviewed for the podcast, she wouldn't like me to call this, but server-wise, she's effectively my boss. She's the owner. And so there was already an existing connection there, which I could ask to say, hey, would you be interested in help me out with this? And she kindly was more than happy to. And so, of course, working with OBS is a nightmare. I hate it. XYZ. I always forget something, but that's just life. But from the walk specifically, as I said, I wanted to just expose the people within Vrchat who do stuff, and in a positive sense, because you always hear about the downfall of this, the failure of this, XYZ, but no one hears about this is what this creator does. This is what they're known for. This is what they do. It's like, look at the magnificent artwork of this creator. This is what people think. This is what the community figure thinks of their own community, how it wants to develop over time. Because although my cookings are pretty well structured, I like to include audience questions if and where I can, which makes a more personal feel, because then people get to ask what they want to. They get to have their own personal input. Of course, it's vetted, but there's only so much I can ask on YouTube. But it's never really like that. And so you get a different dynamic from the mixture of me trying to fully understand their thoughts and motives of the person I'm interviewing, or the people I'm interviewing, and depending in some cases, but although you get a different angle. I'm very much past, present, future. It's like, where have you been? How do you get there? What are you doing now? And where do you want to see yourself in the future? And it's the looking forward. Links to what it's always the looking forwards and things. And it's saying, hey, how can I improve? And of course, sometimes you can't always improve. And that's just the natural progression as you hit the perimeter of things. But at the same time, maybe you're looking at it from the right angle. Maybe you just have to change perspectives on things. And I find even with the questions from people who outside, who's not me, who are asking them, you get a different viewpoint, which then suddenly could ignite a person, and then you get a different frame of reference. And suddenly they've gone from, they're quite happy, quite interested, to suddenly just elated and alive. And because it's this either slight personal question, which they're willing to talk about, which I might not have known. And it brings people up. And it shows people for their passions and what they truly are. And that's what I want to do, is to show people how they really are in their full colors.
Okay. What have been some communities you've reached out to that you enjoyed the conversation with? Or creators?
So this one isn't out yet, but I found the recent conversation with Insane Asylum. He's another murder mystery host, but he's also a host for his own small little community. They're quite private on the whole. They're open to new people, but it's more of a they're not trying to expand. They just have the community they have. It's a solid community. They love doing games or streaming. But the conversation with Insane, which although I haven't fully edited and published yet, although it hit a slightly more darker tone and personal tone for him, because of things I won't go into, but I've known him for a while, like in the distance. I've never really fully spoken to him. he appears as like very a tough person, like as in, you know, slightly cold, a little disinterested, which can scare people off. But taking off the mask a little bit and seeing the reasonings behind his avatar design, why he does what he does. I remember sitting and thinking in that interview, and although there was, of course, funny bits, you know, we had a good laugh, it gave you a different perspective on things. And while doing it, I was just, since I was quite distant, it was, you know, I don't really understand him. But then having him talk, I got it. I understand to an extent why he is the way he is. And that's just himself. That's himself not caring about anyone else. And if people are there, they're there for him. And that's completely fair. And that's why I like talking to people, because I get a different perspective. I'm a very empathetic person. Empathetic? God, you know it's late. I'm a very empathetic person as things goes, and I like to see people's different perspectives. Sure, I might not agree with people, but that's life. But when you can put yourself in people's different shoes and see people from different viewpoints, you get different outlooks on the world, and it's like, well, sure. Even in this world, you know, it's like this world is gorgeous, but if you were thinking from an actual real world perspective, it's like, oh no, it's starting to come towards winter. You know, that means it's getting darker, it's getting colder. But at the same time, if you kind of shift the perspective on things, it's like, well, at this time you would have had a bountiful harvest. And that's what you find when you talk to different people, different cultures. You change your perspective, and it develops over time. And my perspective has changed drastically over the years, but then that's partially due to the communities that have been in pre-VRchat and also being in VRchat and trying to be as receptive as possible to different communities, different cultures, different people, because we're all different. We all have our history, and we're all built off of our experiences. And although technically we can all fall in within this overall spectrum circle of various different things, I won't go into the details because I can't remember it as of right now without my notes. But you find people show themselves in different ways, and from there, people make sense. And sure, it comes from not so great places, but I like to read people. I like to understand people. And the more, if I spend a bit of time listening to people and seeing how they talk, how they phrase themselves, how they present themselves, I'm as basic as you get. I'm white man in suit with space hair as a little bit of salt and pepper to add to the flavoring. It's very simple, but it's just how I like to keep myself modest. I like to humble myself. I don't want to be all flashy over the place, which is why a podcast is a different realm for me, but I'm more than happy for it. But then you find people change over time, and that's the beauty within VRchat. It's, as some people in some of the communities, it's what pipeline you're going to go down. Because I've spoken to some people them starting VRchat, and I said to them, you better know yourself before you enter this game, because if you don't know yourself, you'll learn. And you'll learn what kind of pipeline, I say pipeline, but it's like whether you want to be a furry or a booth avatar or a Gumroad, XYZ, maybe different communities, different pipelines to go down in that regard. And you better know what you are, what you stand for, and what you want. Because if you don't, give it a year, give it 2 years, you'll be switching fast. I've met people who were, you know, not always the most welcoming to people at first, but then that's because they were only exposed to their little bubble. When that bubble is burst, and people get to see people for who they are, their perceptions changes. you watch it. Even some of my closest friends who weren't so receptive to things, they've had their entire logic and likes and dislikes flipped. I've watched some of my friends come from not being great fans of furries at all to being a furry themselves. I've watched some of my friends being very cold towards different cultures, and then suddenly they're embracing it all. And that's the beauty I find inside it. I like to think, as much as some people try and gaslight me, love you guys too, into saying I'm not going to go down a pipeline. I like to say I know where I stand, because I try to be very welcoming of people, but I still have my hard stances. I'm willing to disagree and agree on people, but that's just people have their different viewpoints. But when you watch people develop as they get exposed to new experiences, it's very heartening. It's very eye-opening, because you realize people haven't put themselves out there. And so on the whole, if I'm going to link this back to any point, is because of that, it's another reason why I like this game so much. That's kind of my overarching points.
I very much appreciate you sharing that. I do have a question based on what you've shared with us. It seems like you have a perspective that you want to show what you've learned and what VRChat means to people to outside world. What are your motives for wanting to do that, to show what you're seeing here? Hello, just real quick, I'll only take a few seconds of your time. In the description that way, you have a card, metaversedegen.card.co. We have many links down there for you to come check out. We have an X link, which is with me. We have a Discord where we hang out and do stuff all the time, as well as a Patreon link, where if you wish to support us, you can. Where there's also a show and another podcast separate from Metaverse Degen, which we have available to our wonderful members who signed up, such as Niche, Training Fangs, Aleekum, and Forbidden Zero. Thank you all. You're all amazing. Enjoy the rest of your video. I won't take up any of your time.
So, it's a mixture of a personality and culture thing. You find people who live in very isolated areas or isolated regions of the world can have very closed off worldviews, which, they only know what they've experienced. I can guarantee you I would be the same if it wasn't for the internet and me trying to put myself out there over the last, 6 years or so. And if you can put yourself out there and see the different viewpoints, it just changes your overall outlook. And especially in pockets of America, pockets even where I live over in the UK, over the pond, if you will, there's very, very closed off regions, and not all people will be receptive. And that's fine. I'm not going to ask people to be receptive to something they're not interested in. Sucks for them, but I'm interested in practically anything. I love learning about it. I try to find an interest in basically everything. Sure, I'm not perfect. I'm going to struggle to finding interesting in steps, as the small visual example I have right in front of me. But even in architecture, you can find how different cultures were built upon, how they design the things their logic in their overall designs, to say, hey, why have they designed that way? Because as a person, I'm very question-based, which is an absolute nightmare for anyone who knows me, but sucks to suck. I ask a lot of questions. I love, which is also linking on to why I had the podcast. I looked at myself when I was on that walk, and I thought, what am I good at? And what can I do? Well, I like VRChat. I have, although a very small network at the time, a network of people who know me. And what do I like doing? I like asking questions. I like questioning the world around me, and which allows me to change how I think on things. And I use the information I've been given, I filter it down, I use my own logic, how I feel, and my stance towards things, and be like, hey, I may shift this way, or this way, or up or down, depending on how things go. But because of that, I question a lot. I ask a lot of questions, which again is a nightmare. But when I put those things together in my head, as I reached the end of the loop, the tip of the loop, if you will, I walk. I was like, well, I listened to a lot of podcasts in the past, so if you're asking a lot of questions, and you could maybe even do it in VRChat, and if you ask a lot of questions and do it in VRChat, you have even a small network which you can build across over time if you put yourself out there. Well, what do you have? You have a VRChat podcast. That's what you blooming well have. And I remember as I started coming back towards my village, I started to look at the VRChat podcast, and as you said before stream, a lot of them were quite empty. There wasn't many around, at least on Spotify. And I was like, oh, well, maybe this is a niche market I could, go into and show people what's around. Because sure, there was a couple podcasts, but they were more just general talks rather than interviews or such. And so I was like, oh, well, it doesn't seem really anyone's around. And so I looked around and I was like, okay. Now, how did I get the name? And I'm like, well, what are you wearing? You're wearing a headset. Well, everyone has to look through a lens. Well, if we're going into the people, you're going almost behind the lens. And that's where the name came from. And I was like, well, you're taking people out of the headset and into the mind and into the person. And that's how we got, how I developed behind the lens.
Oh.
And so that's kind of why it's got its little blue tinge. Because if you know anything about lenses, they've got kind of a small blue tinge, usually, at least with glass-wise. And so that's kind of where everything built upon. Eventually, as I started heading towards the walk, the clouds had already clouded over, and if you know anything about the UK, it absolutely bucketed it down. But I had enough time to run back home while I'm absolutely drenched with an idea. It might be a eureka, if you will.
Oh, so from the experiences you've had so far in both the hosting in games and the podcast, were there any experiences or people you've talked to or conversations that made you question what you know or what you think reality is, or even yourself?
I mean, you find that with every conversation in its own way. You might not realize it at first, but even just the conversations and how they develop with people. And again, with hosting with feedback on events and stuff, you find that changes that. Speaking with a lot of streamer friends, because before I started doing podcast things, I was going into streaming at the time a bit more. And so stream-wise, I know a lot of people dotted around all over the place. And so with their feedback on like, hey, how to best promote yourself, how to look into things, tags, design, overall layout. And I Lord knows how many hours I spent into all of them combined. I can tell you for a murder mystery alone, it'll probably take me about 8 hours to plan. It really depends wildly, because I've got to think of what characters, if I can, am I playing, what kind of layout, the poster design, the banner design, if need be. Then I've got to be like, what are my players? And again, if you know, with anything which requires a level of input from your players, people are notoriously pulling out. And so I can start with a script list of 16, but I've had games where half that list changed. And so I've had to rearrange the role list, rearrange my order, and be like, well, I can't give this role to this person because they're too inexperienced, or maybe they're not suited for that kind of role. And so you have to juggle, you have to shift, you have to adapt. And that's what I to find is one of my strengths, is being able to adapt. It's why I like to, at least from when I do my podcast, I like to talk to people. Because although I will still always be myself, I like to show myself for who I am. I get to best suit myself to mirror the person I'm working with. And so I can best bounce off. And it just, on the whole, creates a more enjoyable experience because everything feels natural. I don't want things to be too forced if possible. I want people to be calm. I want people to be comfortable. I'm not here to be like, oh my god, Lion, I'm exposing you for this one thing you did 57 years ago.
Jokes on you wasn't
And
alive
so
57 years ago.
that
Sorry.
was the joke. But yes, no, you're fine.
Oh my god.
I didn't want.
Oh my gosh. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy.
You barely were. I was Caesar.
Okay, smart ass. See what you opened? You opened up the fucking door and now he's gonna play in it. He's gonna play in it and pick on me. See how it is? Yep. Thank you very much. Love you to death.
You know I love you, Raptor.
Yeah, just like
Yeah,
chalk
well.
itch. It only comes around until you spray it and then it's gone.
I mean, did you count the stab wounds at the time?
Oh, I got bullet holes in me now, but that don't count.
Oh, that's different.
wasn't there.
That's not agent wounds.
Thank God. Thank God he wasn't there, because that'd be a fucking nightmare. He'd be talking to the doc.
What are you
Can you put
talking
an
about?
extra hole here? I want to know. Oh, my gallbladder being removed. I think that is what I was getting at.
Doc,
I
you
can
should
wake
stick
up
a
seeing
rubber
his
duck in
face
there and
and-
see how long it takes you to figure out there's a duck in him.
Oh, thanks. Smart ass. Gotta love your friends, right? Right, folks? Gotta love your friends, because without them, guess what? You can't pick their nose, but you can pick your own, and then you don't want to pick your friend's nose, and that's a real bitch.
Sorry for the tangent.
No,
Sorry.
no, I'm more than welcome. I'm the type of person who I struggle to speak when a lot of people are speaking, so I will naturally go quiet because I'm, by default, a more of a listener type. Again, therapy, friends, etc. That downhill spiral. But I like to listen to people because I know I can learn a lot from people, and so that's why I listen to podcasts.
Does that mean I gotta leave? Does that mean I gotta leave?
Why would you leave?
Because everybody asks me that question. You know that. They'll come up to me and ask, hey, can you give me a little pointers? It's hard as a older gentleman being in VR. You can give them advice, but what they take is their own prerogative. But sometimes it scares the shit out of you because you don't want them to follow the same road you've traveled. And most of the time, if you know people, they listen, but they'll travel it anyhow just to see how bumpy it is. It's weird. I just don't. I've never put my finger onto it. It's just one of those things. But yeah, that's what I mean.
I mean, in a sense, if you think about it, it's if you show them the road you've traveled, it's the only road they know. And so unless something drastic happens, which is suddenly push them down off the cliff, down the hill, and they're suddenly running along the stream of the river, unless they find the way to do that, which isn't always in the nicest way, but they'll probably be following your road anyway, because again, it's the only road they know. But
and that's where it gets to be the scary part. See, when you get to all the hell I've been through and everything else like this, and hopefully nobody goes through the same hell. Some people do, somebody has it worse, and everything else. Everybody has it worse than what you do. You just think you do. But the biggest thing is when somebody asks you that question, you put on the brakes. You literally will put on the brakes. If anybody asks you a certain question or something like this, and they literally slam on the brakes, it's not because you don't want them to go down that road, but you just have the heart that you don't want to see them fall. I guess is a good way to put it. You just don't want them falling. And it's one of those things. So the best thing you can do is what you just said, is a listener. Let them dump on you. And then they ask you, what do you think? Then you have to stand back going, was I really paying attention? I hope God you was, because that's a true friend. You're supposed to pay attention, just not blow them off because they want to blow off steam and they have no one else to go to. No, a friend is going to listen no matter what the ordeal is and stick it out. And me and Lion do it all the time. We bounce shit off each other like it's the plague. And you probably get the same thing when somebody comes up, even if you're interviewing. If you're sitting there interviewing or anything like this, and guess what, folks? He is, after this episode of us talking to him, he's going to do it on us. You get to find out, like you said earlier, before we started, you did some research. because you watched some of the stuff we've done. That gives you a basic line, but it doesn't give you the whole line. It only gives you the outer. It's like trying to color inside the line, knowing it's going to be darker on the outside of that line if you just don't see it. So you'll find out when you get to interview us, me and Line, you're going to go, my God, what can of worms did I open up? Because guess what? And I'm going on a tangent. See what happens when I open my mouth and say something I shouldn't be.
To break in a little bit of humor before I pass it back over to Nebula here, with your accent, I can't tell if you're saying lion or line. So with that said, it kind of adds a new context to everything you just shared at the end about coloring in the lion or line. Sorry, bad humor.
Oh no, I'm fully supportive of it. I mean, to be fair, I think the puns here are the main event, but like that might be me. But yeah,
just don't kick me. I fly real good.
Indeed.
I mean, you know, it might happen towards the tail end, but you know, I do enjoy a good pun as well. So I'm sorry, Raptor.
Okay. Oh no, don't apologize. Whatever you do, don't apologize. I've had a lot of stuff go through me, around me, and everything else like this. It's nice. Is like me and Lion always say, it's great to meet the people that are in here, and without them, we don't learn anything. And that's what we like. We want to learn, and it's like a computer getting the first time that you plug it in and it boots itself. You want all the information you can get, just like an AI. And everything else like this. You're giving us information that we somewhere down the road, we might not use it, but it's still there. And that's the biggest thing. And you do the same thing for your friends, no matter who they are, who you interview, or who you talk to, no matter what they are, who you host for. What you get off of it is your enjoyment. And the enjoyment for that is a perfect line. Now, you're going to have bumps in those lines. You've already said it yourself. You have bumps in those lines, and it's another way of looking at it. I look at things differently. So do you. So does Lion. That's what makes us us. And you're saying it thick as thieves of what you're saying and everything else like this. And that is great. That is the best thing you can do, no matter what, is to be yourself. And that's what people want. Some people are not. They try to be fakes and stuff like this. But it don't matter who they are. If that's what they want to be, is a fake, not a flake. I want to make sure I'm saying my words properly. I don't want to get the line and line mixed up. Smart ass.
I still can't.
And
at least I can, but it's still funnier that way.
Thank you. Thank you. But still, even that thought behind it at all and what you do is great. And everything else, and what you take, you're a kind of person like me and Lion. We don't want nothing in return. All we want is your time, and that means the most to us. No matter what the numbers say or how many hour views we get, we don't care. It's the idea we get to meet. And my phone goes off. Sorry about that. We get to meet more and more people in VR, and we haven't even scratched the surface. We have not even scratched the surface yet.
So.
For something,
I have a question for you now, Nebula.
For you.
Of the interviews, what were some of your more favorite interviews you've had?
Fuck. I don't like putting any people above one another. Fuck you. I hate you. Why you like this? Okay.
wow, here it comes. You got it good now.
Yeah, well, you know, I will never say why I liked each interview are higher than the other, because I will like them in different ways. With if I was to quickly fire through it, with the first episode with an interview, she's a very she's a person who does a lot of work, and she works herself to pieces, poor thing. But she works for the community on what she does, and she's trying to create a safe community for people to do games, etc. And hearing her kind of logic and understanding of things, if I can vaguely remember what we talked about, it gives you kind of a different perspective and logic. With an episode with Shadow, who is he's a good friend of mine, and he does a lot of VRchat content himself. So he does, or in the sense of skits, he's a skit man, if you will. it was a lot more lighthearted, jokey, with a couple personal questions intertwined between. And so you can feel the different vibes that shift upon. And with more Crow, she was looking at more how she's going to plan to come back to YouTube and streaming and such, because she's taken a bit out. She used to do a lot of content, kind of took a step back. She does a bit of hosting now herself. And then with people like Trengo, Trengo's was a lot of lore and information of him. He used to run a thing called the Portuguese Murder Mystery. And that came out of Elizabeth's game. I won't go into details, but it brought the Portuguese community together, at least in their little pocket, while it was around. But then, again, stuff happened, it shut down. But even him now, he's doing work for a VRchat documentary, and he's doing work for his university with a VRchat documentary. He's acting as a speaker on part of the interviews and such. And you can see how he's developed in his own way. And then you've got Jedi, who's one of the co-owners of Elizabeth's game, and you can see how his thoughts on murder mystery, how our two styles differ, how he's created his characters, how he presents himself. And then you've got Church, who's the owner of the Synapse, and they do. They've shown like what they do, how they've come about, and all their interests, and how they want to bring up Synapse, because the Synapse wasn't hosting so much, but now she's trying to bring it back and give people, because she's got a large community, but they're not, at least in my opinion, they're quite separate, because it's based on the actual people who mainly joined. And so people joining the Discord and joining the events, it's a lot less compared to the size it shows. And so it's bringing that back together and bringing together a community. I fully believe with all the work that she and her community, her staff team, it's possible. They've got everything from media groups to event hosts to background development, etc. A lot which would go way over my head. Lord knows I can't touch Unity and Blender for the life of me. I can just about get by. But from that, you can see how people are bringing things together on the whole. And that's why when you ask me what was my favorite interview, I can't really say one. I know you yourself have been the same, with very diplomatic on it. But it's not because I disliked any. I loved them all. It's just the purpose of why I love them all is different. It depends on the situation. So that's my diplomatic, ungodly answer to your very specific question.
Sorry I put you in the spot, but I wanted to ask the question that was asked of me a few times just to see how you'd respond. And I very much can agree with you. There is never one favorite over the other, because each one has things you can learn and amazing personalities of each. There's a lot, I'm sure, on both your channel and mine for people to find out. There's a lot here, and you can't just go, I like this community over that community. I like this personality over that one. It's like looking at a crayon box and going, which one will be perfect for all of it? It's hard because each has their own purpose.
Exactly. You've got it spot on. And I can say that some things, of course, I have my interests. I might be interested in more of this rather than this, but that's because we're all human. We all have our different likes and dislikes. You can't ever expect people to like everything. And so from that, again, with it can even link into stuff like hosting or how I do things. You will never please everyone, and that's a tough pillow I had to swallow over the years. Is you'll never be able to please everyone, but if you can please the people who you care for and the people around yourself in enough of a competent way, and where people are happy or at least satisfied, I know I'm doing the right thing. If I'm not starting a mob which is coming to burn down my house, then I know I've got a problem. But, we'll get to that when we get to
that. Don't worry, it won't be me. You won't see me there. One, I can't swim that far. And secondly, it'd be a fire on me because I'd be the one on fire.
I mean, that's fair. But, if I see a raptor in a crowd, we all know where that's come from.
Oh,
So-
God, here we go. I ain't going there. Sorry, folks, I ain't going there. Leave that one alone. I ain't gonna touch it.
Well, to be fair, based on the long list of nicknames you accumulated, I don't think sometimes you have a choice in that matter.
And like you say, most of the time I bring it on myself. So you think about that one too, folks.
Well, I think upon our final few questions, I want to ask a few things, but I'm sure Raptor wants them as well. One of them that you always enjoy asking?
How'd you get your name?
I-
How'd you get your name? Get your name that's above your head, sir. That's one. The second one is when you first came into VR. Since you've talked a lot, and the first thing you saw, and you said, "Fuck this! I'm out. I'm running." What was it?
I will start with the first one because I've been dreading the second one because I've had to rack my goldfish of a brain to be like, what do I remember? Nothing. So, first question. Although, so my full username is UnbatedNebula, which, although it sounds like the most obscure thing, I promise it's not as glitzy and glamorous as people think. It came from an old Xbox name. When I first got my Xbox back in 2014, I won't go for the specific name version of it, but it was essentially an iteration of that. And from there, later down the line, I created a Steam account. I was like, well, I need a username. Fuck. And I was like, well, I've got my Xbox. Just take off all the numbers and the extra jargon at the end and just use that. And I'm like, sure. And so that's kind of how that came about. Another thing is on my branding. As you can see, I'm very consistent on the space theme. Again, Nebula. The artwork for it was done by a close friend of mine, Oreo. She made the artwork in 2021 for me. I asked her. The overall artwork is basically a small purple planet in the sky on an ocean planet with a turtle inside. And so that's the initial full piece of artwork, which a lot of my branding is built upon. And so I use the planet as an easy avatar because, circle, it works. But ever since then, I've not changed my profile picture since 2021 on Discord, and I refuse to for the foreseeable future, just because that's me. It was initially some space photos and such. To go on to your second question, which I've been dreading worse than the blimmin' plague. So, first memory that I had, which was, nope, I'm out. Okay, I think I had a good answer from this, which I remembered a while back before the interview. I was like, I'll go answer that. I forgot. One of the early things which I remember. Okay. This wasn't so much early, but it was still earlier on. I remember. I can't remember if I was there in person or I was there in the background, but we went to this world, and it was essentially this. It's a cursed world, and I hate that I know it exists, but it's effectively you basically spawn in this world, and it's kind of, I can't remember if it was just an image or I think it was just an image of a woman, and there was like an audio, and it was essentially her beating the crap out of you. Which was like, sure, I know it was for the funny, but it's like, what the fuck? Why did you make this? Why? So, I think I would count the first couple months as early enough that I could distinctly remember that world. So that was one of the early curse things I remember seeing. Probably something in the Black Cats or something or the other. It's VRchat. You're guaranteed to see some scuff shit. Welcome to VRchat, need I say more?
Yep.
Indeed. Well, Nebula, thank you so very much for chatting with us. It's been an absolute pleasure getting to meet you, hearing about everything from the murder mysteries to your podcast. It's very much appreciated.
Very much
Thank you very much, yourself. Thank you both.
Oh,
it's been a pleasure. Strange gushing about myself. I'm not. It's a very different realm. I prefer letting other people talk, but I'm not stranger to it anymore. So it was nice
Not
regardless.
now.
Yeah.
Not now. Yeah, we got you whipped right in, didn't we? Oh shit! No chains added.
Oh god.
So where can the audience
yeah.
find you if they wish to find you?
So I'm gonna have to open my VRChat group so I remember the actual thing. So I can be found at UnbatedNebula on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Twitch, and I have a VRChat group called the Nebula, which is simplified down to Nebula 5.5967. This group is mainly just for stuff I do. People can follow it if they want. You know, I post monthly on where I am, what I'm doing. This is the times, dates in both. I think I post at Eastern Standard Time and British Standard Time. So whichever you prefer, really. It's on that and where I am hosting for stuff. Twitter, it's usually for things like general events I'm going to. I should probably post them more on Instagram, but I usually post about if I'm doing uploads at the times. So all of that comes out on there. Same with Instagram. I need to use more of the same. Welcome to the life of creator. I forget I have platforms and I need to promote. YouTube, it's all podcasts. So all my podcasts is on there. Also on Spotify, but I just run it in the background if people want it. It's there. I don't really promote it though. And Twitch, I stream sometimes, usually Thursdays with my friend Crow. She's great. And whenever with the odd stream here and there, if and when I have the time. Hopefully that helps.
Indeed. Thank you very much for sharing all that. I'll be in the hoobly what's it. And I'm still remembering every time Raptor says line, thinking lion, it changes the context of half the things you said today. So with that said, do the thing,
good.
Mr. Raptor.
Okay, since he's being a smartass, and you have the opportunity to be in VR, and you get this thought of watching this video, and if you do, you don't, that's cool. We have no problem. But if you have a box of crayons in your hands and everything else, what color you might be? And give us a shout back what color you think you might be. And guess what? Because we don't care. We're having fun. That's the color you should be. Bye, folks. We'll talk to you later. Bye.